This is Thomas. I wanted to talk a little bit about organizing information in a graphic way or in a visual way so that people better understand the information or can read it clearly and quickly. So, this is a very complicated process, and this isn't what this class is about in general. So, we have to be very good to ourselves and admit that we're not going to capture everything, but we're going to capture pieces of it. So, right off the bat, I want you to look at this image here. It's very small, but just get the notion that the black areas are Palestine and the yellow areas are the Israeli regions. And you can see that over from 1917, which is right here, everything was owned by Palestine. And by 1947, Israel owned quite a large section of this region. And then slowly the borders shifted and shifted until the present day, where we have something where Israel has taken over most of the areas and Palestine has been relegated to these tiny areas. So when you hear the words Palestine and Israel conflict, and you think, well, I don't even know what that means or why it happened or whatever, and then you stumble upon an image like this, you quickly see that from 1917 to the present day, which is about 100 years, as this map was made a couple of years ago, you can see what happened at least on one side of the story very quickly, and then there's some historical data down here tracking along that date line. So what you're seeing is this is called a journey map. This is a map that goes from left to right through a date and time and establishes certain information in that date-time order. Now, to analyze an image, I want us to consider looking at something like this for a second. This is, I want to make a horror movie, right? And if you look, you think, how do I organize information or even begin to understand it? What we do is we take some things that we admire, information we've read or seen in the world, and these are examples of things that I admire, and then I analyze them. I try to understand how they flow or work to see what things I like or consider useful. In this one, you'll see that right here, I did a sketch. It says, first, what kind of frame and size is it? So it's rather tall and long right here. And then number two, I do this, which is sort of an analysis of the basic elements. So I just draw doodles of the basic elements and how big they are or small they are and which direction things are moving and whatnot. And I noticed that it seems a bit symmetrical. It's symmetrical, but seems a bit random otherwise. But I say, if I translate the whole thing into black and white, and in essence black and white or red and white, I see that it changes from top to bottom. So I see that there's a significant shift from the top down to the bottom and how it spreads out down here. So the energy, if you look, there's kind of an energy of a triangle at the bottom, and then everything's stacked up the center, very symmetrical piles, and then there's a big band across the top again, which is not necessarily symmetrical, close to it, but not as much as the elements here are, which go back and forth. So I might notice that I like symmetry. So when I start to design something, I might take that into consideration. At the same time, I like this image. If you look over here again, I kind of get the frame, which is rectangular. I look at some of the basic elements. I draw it really quickly just to see that there's like big things and small things, and it moves in a direction sort of like a wave getting bigger over here. So this is just to assess like gross information of what's in the image. If I look closer, which I did down here, you start to see what each thing means. So this, a little bit like a timeline map going this way, but this one has an XY axis. So this one does dates this way, and then it does duration or years this way. So if something you're analyzing has two different directions, sometimes they'll call that an XY axis map. So you have an X and a Y axis. In this case, the X, like I said, is dates, and the Y is the duration or years of these wars. If you look here, there's a key to this whole thing, so you know what you're reading. And it says, oh, you know what? The drawing I did here is for a different image than what you're looking at here, a subtly different one. But basically it talks about regions, which is similar right here, the regions that influenced this map. So the flowers are slightly different colors depending on the region. And the number of deaths is analyzed somewhere else. So I actually, you know what I could do? I could take you real quickly to that image. This is the number of deaths right here, which they excluded from that last map, and the number of deaths is the size of the flower. So you know, and if it goes over that, they list the dates underneath it. All right. But back to these images, which are underneath here, and now I got stuck. There we go. We go back here, you notice that it says down here, the content, the context, and the user must be considered in mapping these information, in this information design. So what that means is the content is what story or elements are you trying to tell? So this is about World War II, deaths during wars and how many people died during those wars. So you can see in World War II is the largest percentage of people died. World War I, a large percentage died, but not nearly as much as in World War II. And then beyond that, the number of deaths drops rather significantly for all the other conflicts that occurred around the world. So it's a quick way to see how the amount of people that died during a war relate to each other. And who would be using this is when you say the user, it's your audience or who would have to share in this. So you might have to give people different kinds of information. A lot of times students will say, like, mine is about for general populace. That may be true, but it's not. If it's for the general populace, it's probably not for everybody. It's probably for people who might be able to read a magazine, which is a particular set of people, and who might be reading a magazine for particular information. So if it's somebody who has no information of wars, like a third grader, you might have to explain what a war is. That's a different context, a different user, and it's a different context because the context is where the image will be read. Will it be in an educational setting? Will it be on the street? Will it be in a school? Who's actually going to interact with it creates different qualifiers that you have to attend to. So would you have to include basic descriptions, introductions, just the title of the whole thing, you know? Is it very raw and sort of on the street to grab people's attention and get them to go to a site that's more thorough and explanatory? So you have to consider all those things. This is the end of this video. Thank you so much for taking a tour, and I hope you are well. Be good. Bye.